And we heard this over and over again. They didn't want us to come out and support it unless they knew it would pass, and not just pass out of the House, but pass over to the Senate and become law. Because if they didn't want to waste their political capital or whatever, if nothing was going to happen with it. So it was this big catch-22. You know, you couldn't get the support because, or you couldn't make sure it would pass because people wouldn't commit to supporting it. And then the people in the Senate would say, well, we want to see what comes out of the House. And so it was back and forth, back and forth. It was very, very difficult to get the sponsors. And so when we got the 32 votes in the House, we thought we had it. I thought Oregon's going to be the first state to get this thing passed. And I was really, really excited about it. And then I think we got to see the true colors of our committee chair who promised us this vote. We started seeing some of the arguments we heard that are very difficult to counter, but these are the kind of arguments we heard. The National Guard has always been treated like, kind of like a redheaded stepchild. They don't want to be, they're not given the due respect. Sorry, Dan. No offense. No offense. They're not treated as peers, and that if we don't send them into combat, it will be an insult to them. We're saying that they're not capable, and so we have to send them to Iraq to honor them, honor their capabilities. Secondly, and this is the one that I heard over and over again, and not just on a state level, but on a federal level too, is that we support the troops. We support the troops, and I get so sick, especially as a veteran, of hearing, we support the troops.
Yeah.
That's, what they're saying is, we support the military, industrial, political, media complex, and the conflicts that go with that. That's what we support. And so, but we cannot seem to get them to stand up and say, I support the troops by making sure that the orders for them to go into warfare, to wage battle, are lawful ones. That's supporting the troops. But we can't get them to stand up and say that. It's so much easier to say, I support the troops, and we got to make sure they get funding for their aftercare programs. And let's just make sure they're not going into harm's way illegally. That would be a real good idea. So that is driving me crazy. And you know what? This $108 billion that Congress approved in June, the same congressmen that were appalled when the Republicans were saying, this money is, if you don't vote for this money to support, to pay for the war, then you don't support the troops. The same people were using the same mantra of support the troops, this money is to support the troops, and it's not for the troops, it is for war. So if we could separate that and say, the troops and the conflict are two separate things, and I have 0 time left, okay. All right, I'm sorry. I will wrap up real quickly. So the bottom line is we never got the vote, we ran out of time. And basically, I don't think that when Roblin is the chair of the committee, the Rules Committee, I don't think he seriously thought we could get the votes. So it was an easy promise to make. You just show me the votes, you do all the work for me, and then we'll get you a House vote, floor vote. So I think the promise made to us was made, easily because he didn't think we'd get there. The people did get there. We showed them what the people wanted, and we were ignored. So it's a very frustrating situation that Oregonians find themselves in right now. Thank you.
Next, I'd like to bring up one of our panelists, Ben Manski.
And you can tell Leah Bolger's passion for the cause because they were disappointed that they only managed to get a majority of the lower chamber on board with this legislation. Oregon really was a groundbreaker in this campaign nationally, and it's not over yet. We'll get Wisconsin on board. We'll come passing around. I'd like to begin with a passage by a great American, Emma Lazarus. Not like the brazen giant of Greek fame, with conquering limbs astride from land to land. Here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name Mother of Exiles. From her beacon hand glows worldwide welcome. Her mild eyes command the air-bridged harbor that twin cities framed. Keep, ancient lands, your storied pomp, cries she. For those less familiar, the next line is, with silent lips, give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. We hear the latter portion of that poem, of that sonnet. The title of that sonnet, of course, is the New Colossus. So often we hear of the welcoming of immigrants to this continent, but not of this continent, not of this country's commitment to anti-imperialism, to be a different kind of nation, a new Colossus. The New Colossus speaks to the best democratic aspirations of America. For Lazarus to champion an American Colossus that, in contrast to those ancient lands with their storied pomp, a Colossus that did not conquer but instead beckoned hither, well, that was actually possible in her day. That was possible. The USA of her day, of 1883, was not well equipped to invade and to indefinitely occupy other nations. It had happened, surely, but not in the grand scheme of things all that often. That was all about to change, of course, but it had not changed yet. And what was about to change, among other related things, was the structure of military organization in the United States. This nation was about to move from a militia system to an army and reserve system. And that made all the difference. And that's really my thesis for you today. Let's look at the militia at the time of the Revolution. There have been those who have spoken already who have cited an originalism of a different kind, and I'm with them. Blackstone's commentaries on the laws of England tell us that the origins of the English, and therefore the American, militia system originates with the time of King Alfred, over a millennium ago. Blackstone tells us that the militia have always been associated with a periphery. Regular armies have been associated with empire. There are reasons for that. It's natural. The same was true in the American colonies. The colonies were on the periphery, and the primary mode of defense was therefore the people in arms, the militia. Now let's be clear also that as there have been militia and there have been regular armies, there has always been a tension between the militia and the regular army. In the English Civil War, the militia stood with Parliament and the regular army were with the king. Note that cross-Atlantic trips went in both directions. There were many colonists who returned to England during the time of the Glorious Revolution, and they fought with the side of Parliament for the most part, and their grandchildren were revolutionaries. There was an oral tradition. There was a family history to respect for the militia. Tension was also always present in the years leading up to the Declaration of Independence. In the French and Indian War, relations between the colonial militia and the regular army were strained, to say the least. There was not much respect that was there. There was not much love that was lost. With the adoption of the Quartering Acts of 1765 and 1766, the colonists found themselves obligated to provide accommodation and supplies, and maybe their family hard cider, to the Redcoats. That didn't make the colonists too happy either. These tensions led to some small events that occurred in Boston, in Worcester, in Concord, in Lexington, and elsewhere, and the adoption of what for a time in American history was known by many as the Liberty Constitution, aka the Declaration of Independence. Liberty constitutionalism was a doctrine that became strongly associated with the abolitionist movement. It held that the U.S. Declaration of Independence, together with the many local and state declarations, written state constitutions, and resolutions, provided the first principles of American constitutionalism, and were superior to the Federalist Papers in this. The spirit of the Constitution was liberty, not slavery. The Liberty Constitution was the voice of the people. The Federalist Papers were the voice of the elite. A different perspective. It's a perspective that's been lost in the aftermath of the Civil War. In the case of the military, this view was expressed in various forms. Then U.S. Representative Elbridge Gerry, and there's some debate about pronunciation, but I've settled on that, spoke what was at the time unquestionably the popular view, the majority view in these colonies. What, sir, is the use of a militia? It is to prevent the establishment of a standing army, the bane of liberty. Whenever government means to invade the rights and liberties of the people, they always attempt to destroy the militia in order to raise an army upon their ruins. And those sentiments were not mere words. In 1784, Congress dissolved the regular army, all of it, with the exception of one artillery battery. One battery of artillery. That was our regular army. In the debate over the Constitution of 1789, or the Founders' Constitution, the liberty position was that the militia power should reside almost entirely with the states. And the compromise that was reached, if you look at it, was not really all that far from that position. And I'm reading to you from Article 1, Section 8, Clauses 15 and 16. The Congress shall have power to provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions. To provide for organizing, arming, and disciplining the militia, and for governing such part of them as may be employed in the service of the United States, reserving to the states respectively the appointment of the officers and the authority of training the militia according to the discipline prescribed by Congress. Well, language in there about Congress, not really much about the president in there.